We're fighting for our dignity, for our citizenship, full citizenship rights now. So you're looking at this really contested terrain, and in the middle of this contested terrain, you have African Americans who refuse to go into their place, who refuse to just stand there and take it, and who refuse to just abide by the old ways because they're like, no, this is a new day.
This program is brought to you by Emory University.
Shortly after Pearl Harbor, it's the day that will live in infamy, December 7th, 1941. Well, in January 1942, when the U.S. is fully into the Second World War, this war against supremacy, this war for democracy, this war for human rights. In Sikeston, Missouri, in January 1942, you have the lynching of Cleo Wright. Now, the way that this began is that Cleo Wright had broke into a white woman's home and attempted to rape her. She fought him off. Great. And then she's yelling, get him, get him, get him. The cops come. The cops are running after Cleo. They catch him. He fights. He slashes one of the police officers. They fight back, they shoot him. He gets about 8 bullet wounds in him. He's almost good and done for. Now the thing is that, but he's still alive. So they try to okay, I guess we got to get him some medical care. So they take him to the hospital. Well, it's a whites only hospital because medical care in the United States in the 1940s is Jim Crowed. And there are no black hospitals in the United States, particularly in the Boot Heel of Missouri. So they take him to the white hospital, they begin to plug him up, but, and put a little gauze here, a little gauze there, but the doctor's very clear. Okay, now he's black. He can't stay here. So we've done the best we can do. So I don't know where you're gonna take him, but he's not staying here overnight. And so they try to find places. They eventually take him back to the jail. But by the time they get him back to the jail, the lynch mob has formed. They are absolutely incensed because when you begin to think about it, this is a black man who has tried to rape a white woman and then has slashed a police officer. I mean, he has violated every last single code in Jim Crow America. Now, you would also think that, okay, now he's in jail. He can go through the criminal justice system if he happens to survive his wounds. But that wasn't enough for the mob. When you hear the statements from the lynch party, they describe, it is time, they've gotten a little uppity. It is time to put them back in their place. And so the lynch mob storms the jail, pulls Cleo Wright out of this jail. And again, this is a man that's got 8 bullet wounds in him. They tie him to the back bumper of a car. Then they take off driving into the black neighborhood. And you can imagine this body riddled with 8 bullets bouncing along the rough roads of Sikeston, Missouri. They stop the car in the black neighborhood near a black church where folks are in there on Sunday morning singing praises to God. They cut Cleo Wright's body loose from that bumper. Somehow he is still alive. They then take 5 gallons worth of gasoline, pour it over him, and light a match. Witnesses describing the roasting carcass wafting through the smell coming into the black church. Black folks looking around going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And Cleo Wright raising his hand to God, begging for mercy, the mercy of death, to take him out of that agony. Now that's bad enough. When the grand jury holds its hearing to figure out whether somebody can be charged for this. I mean, you stormed a jail, You tied a man to the back of a bumper. You drove miles into another neighborhood. Then you deliberately went and got 5 gallons worth of gasoline. And you poured it over him, and then you lit a match. Clearly something has really gone wrong here. The grand jury came back and said, no crime has been committed here because he was already dying. Now, when the NAACP investigated this, what the NAACP said is Cleo Wright and all of the Cleo Wrights before him are indicative of the lack of human rights for African Americans in the United States, the lack of education. They said because what is happening is that when blacks were imported into the boot hill of Missouri to pick cotton, the point was to keep them as barely educated and as impoverished as possible so that they could be a cheap, exploitable labor pool that would have absolutely no rights. And Cleo Wright, in fact, best exemplifies that.
Would you like to increase your customer base, grow your online presence, transform the look of your brand? Let the marketing experts at Logo Graphics Design and Advertising help you hit the mark. Logo Graphics has provided marketing solutions for businesses for over 26 years. Our services include website development, marketing flyers or banners, email marketing, nonprofit outreach, social media management, and more. Contact our office to turn your ideas into solutions today. Call us at 1-800-288-9524 or email us at logographicsdna@gmail.com.
Hi, my name is Phyllis O'Hara, CEO and founder of Angelos Jewelry. This spring and summer, I will be bringing to you the Bold and the Beautiful collection, consisting of sparkling 3-piece necklace sets. Get bold and be beautiful. Don't miss our jewelry workshop series each weekend, teaching girls from age 6 to 18 how to express themselves by designing and creating their own unique pieces. Contact us today to register for upcoming workshops or inquire about a special gift at 314-477-3036 by email phyllisohara91@gmail.com and on Facebook at Angelos Jewelry.
Have you ever been pressed for time? Rushing to get to that very important meeting with the big guys, or trying to beat that grace period at work and finding somewhere to park is nearly impossible? You finally find a parking spot in front of the parking meter and you realize that you didn't bring any change. You happen to look over and see a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk, and for a half second, we immediately assume that the homeless person wants something from us. We snap back to reality as we check all our pockets for change because we don't want to get a parking ticket. Coincidentally, we look over and see the homeless man handing us the exact change we need for the parking meter. My new album, View from the Inside Out, was created to encourage listeners to not judge a book by its cover, because sometimes it's the person that we least expect that will be the one that gives us exactly what we need when we need it. View from the Inside Out drops March 19 everywhere. And remember, integrity matters the most when you're by yourself.
Hey, I bring to you DOC, Disciples of Christ Ministries. We are dedicated to the advancement of God's kingdom by bringing our people closer to Christ. We are proving ways to effectively commit Scripture to memory. If you want to memorize biblical text but are not sure what to memorize or how, the SOAP study is perfect for you. The SOAP method: Scripture, observation, application, prayer, is the perfect launching point to begin hiding God's Word in your heart. This user-friendly and godly-inspired gift will give you thought starters to encourage you and others on your spiritual journey, bringing you intrinsic, extrinsic, and most importantly, eternal value. For more information, you may contact us today at 314-449-1337. Receive a free Bible with your order today.
The Dynasty Media Portal is a media distribution platform reflecting multiple genres of music, film, and special events via radio, television, and online streaming. Advertisers and content generators are connected to a combined listening audience of over 14 million viewers with any single piece of content. It's unlimited access for your organization or business through digital and social media marketing. Contact us at 1-800-288-9524 or email us at dynastytelevision@gmail.com. Visit www.dynastytelevisionmediaportal.com and experience what it means to be destined for Dynasty.
This program is brought to you by Emory University.
One of the things that I find absolutely fascinating is how the possibility of what the civil rights movement could have been as a human rights movement. In the 1940s, the NAACP had begun to conceptualize the issue facing black people in America, not as civil rights, the right to vote, the right to a fair trial, the right to a jury of your peers, the right not to be illegally searched and seized, those things that we know as the Bill of Rights, but instead as human rights, the right to education, the right to health care, the right to housing, the right to employment. And the thing that was driving the NAACP to, in fact, look at this was the condition of black America in the 1940s. You know, the massive discrimination, the kinds of public policies that were being put in place that systematically excluded African Americans from the bounty of America. For instance, there was the Social Security Act in the 1930s. We understand Social Security today. But in the 1930s, it was put in place because people had worked so hard, only to have the economic destruction of the Depression throw them out of work with absolutely nothing, barely the clothes on their backs. And these are people who had worked for 30, 40 years. So what happened with the Social Security Act is that you have this powerful, wonderful piece of legislation. And then the Southern Democrats made sure that what was inserted in this legislation to provide the safety net was to in fact exclude two of the major occupations that African Americans held: domestic workers and the agricultural field. So in fact you had 70% of African Americans excluded from Social Security for decades. This is part of what the NAACP is looking at. What they're also seeing in terms of education, you know, we think about the Brown decision of 1954. But going before that, as the NAACP was looking at the conditions in these poll tax states, such as South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, because the quality of education was so horrific for African Americans, over 50% of adult African Americans over the age of 25 had less than 5 years of formal education. Begin to think about what that means when you've got over half of your adult population having less than 5 years of formal education. Think about how well you're able to navigate in a society, in an economy that is becoming more technologically advanced with 5 years of formal education. This is what the NAACP is looking at. What they're also seeing is that in terms of healthcare, you've got this Jim Crow education system. The American Medical Association is saying that for every 1,500 in the population, you need one doctor. The average for African Americans was one for every 3,337. Think about what it takes to be able to go in and see your doctor if you got one for every 3,337. In Mississippi, it was one for every 18,527. This is what the NAACP is saying. And when they're looking at this, they're saying, you know, the right to vote is important. It is powerful. The right to a fair trial. Given what we've been looking at in terms of the lynchings, in terms of the Southern justice, absolutely. But it's not going to be enough to break centuries of slavery and Jim Crow. We need to have human rights. And one of the vehicles that they began to look at was the founding of the United Nations, which came out of the Second World War, which came out of the atrocities of Nazi Germany, which came out of the atrocities of Japan, that Japan had committed in Asia, in China, in Indonesia, in Korea. So with this framework of human rights, the NAACP decided, particularly after the violence in 1946 that went absolutely unabated against African Americans, particularly black veterans, that they needed to go to the UN, because as the NAACP had tried to talk to state legislatures, as they tried to talk to the White House, as they talked to the Attorney General, everybody was saying there's nothing we can do. And so as you're looking for these levers of power, they breached the citadel of the United Nations and the Commission on Human Rights. And they presented a petition, an appeal to the world. Now this petition was beautifully done. It was led by W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a co-founder of the NAACP, and it began to document the systematic violation of human rights in the United States against African Americans. Now, the Cold War has begun in 1947, and the U.S. looked at this document by the NAACP with its 400,000 dues-paying members, because this is now a big dog. The NAACP has credibility. And they have put top scholars working on this document that they're presenting to the UN. When you read through the State Department papers, the State Department is going, oh my God, what are we going to do? We have got to stop this thing. If the Soviets get a hold of this, the Soviet Union is going to have a field day. It's just going to prove everything that they said. We can swat away some of this other stuff as propaganda. This stuff is so beautifully documented, we can't call this propaganda. Okay, we know it's the truth, but so we've got to figure out a way how to stop the truth from being aired in the UN. We do not want our dirty laundry aired during the Cold War.
Wow, I'm a lucky man. She is the light of my life. and as fine as a Georgia pine. Good God from Zion. She's truly been a blessing. So what am I afraid of? I mean, she's perfect in every way. I love her. Yeah, I need to do the right thing. I'm going to do the right thing. Yeah, it's time.
My man is fine. He even looks better in the morning. I love him so much. Although he's not perfect, I accept him for who he is, and I'll support him in every area. I'll be there for him till death do us part.
Excuse me? How do you know Chris?
You must be Deanna.
Hi, I'm Rod McCarthy, CEO founder of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Minorities for Medical Marijuana is a nonprofit advocacy, outreach, and education organization based in Orlando, Florida. Our focus is making sure that minorities have an opportunity in the new legalization of marijuana throughout the country. We're in South Carolina, we're in Missouri, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, Texas, Arizona. Our organization was formed to make sure that individuals, people of color, people coming from communities of color have an opportunity to be able to participate in the legalization of cannabis in the United States.
One of the ways that they went about trying to stop the NAACP was to use the power of Eleanor Roosevelt, who had incredible cachet. She was the chair of the Commission on Human Rights. She was also a member of the NAACP Board of Directors. As that petition is moving its way through the UN, Eleanor and the State Department pulled that thing back, stomped on it, beat on it, used every Robert's Rules of Order to strangle that thing, bury it in the bowels of the UNs, hoping that it would never see the light of day. Now the Soviets are in there fighting, going, oh no, I think this is a really good thing, and we really need to talk about this. And the US is like, no, we don't. But no, we don't. No, we do. What? Talk about what thing? There's no petition here. When that thing got strangled, part of what then leads to the NAACP moving off of its framework of thinking about the struggle for black equality as a human rights struggle was because this was the Cold War, Eleanor Roosevelt and the State Department said, oh, you must be a communist. Only a communist-dominated organization would have the audacity, the temerity, the nerve to create a document like this and send it to the United Nations. That's a communist stunt. And as you're talking about the right to housing, the right to health care, the right to education, that sounds like a Marxist. You must be Marxist. Now again, this is the Cold War. This is the beginning of the Second Red Scare. This is when being even hinted at that you're a communist means the kiss of death in American society. And the NAACP is going, no, we're not communist. We're just fighting for the human rights of African Americans. I mean, look at this. We have African Americans, over 50%, who have less than 5 years of education. That's a problem. No, the problem is that you went to the United Nations. Well, we tried to, no, the problem is you must be a communist. But no, the problem is you must be red. Do you want to end up on the Attorney General's list of communist-dominated organizations? And the NAACP was like, oh my God, we have got to figure out a way oh my, what do we do now? And what you begin to see them do is to pull back from human rights as the foundation for black equality in the United States. And this pullback becomes reinforced by the time we get to 1954. There are a whole series of events that happen. One of the final events that happened is this thing called the Bricker Amendment. And the Bricker Amendment was launched by a conservative Republican senator out of Ohio, John Bricker, that was to change the ways that treaties were ratified in the United States. They were particularly going after these UN treaties dealing with human rights. And the way that they were doing it, now, this is almost a basic civic lesson 101. Now, to ratify a treaty takes 2/3 of the Senate. Under the Bricker Constitutional Amendment, it was going to take 2/3 of the Senate, both houses of Congress, and all 48 state legislatures. Begin to think about the Mississippi State Legislature discussing the Genocide Convention. The Southern Democrats were already clear as they looked at the Genocide Convention, which came out of the Holocaust. They said, oh, this looks like a backdoor method to a federal anti-lynching bill. We've got to stop this. The Southern Democrats were very clear. Senator Walter George out of Georgia said, as I look at these human rights treaties, they just might affect the colored question. Meaning that it was going to change the place of African Americans in American society. That it was in fact going to be freeing. That in fact by providing education, then all of a sudden economic opportunities begin to open up. And as economic opportunities begin to open up, then that laboring that happens in the fields that the South so depended upon, all of a sudden wouldn't be there. This was frightening because it was going to change the balance of power. So what it took to bring down the Bricker Amendment, because it had the necessary 2/3 votes in the Senate to go out into the states for the constitutional amendment to be ratified, is that you got, for one thing, you got massive lobbying by Eisenhower. President Eisenhower is looking up going, man, this looks like the old Articles of Confederation. And we're trying to do this NATO thing. We're trying to be the leader of the free world. And now, all of a sudden, if I have absolutely no power and the states have to ratify everything, we're not going to get anything done. And we're trying to fight the Cold War. And yes, we know that all of this stuff about the right to health care, that's socialism. I have no problem with that. But we already have a process in place to stop that from darkening America's doorstep. Do not pass the Bricker Amendment. Senate looked at him and went, shh, we got work to do. And so when this bill is coming down and they're voting and they're counting their heads, 1,000, and it's like, yes, yes, yes. It looks like they've got their 2/3. And then somebody says, where's Harley? Where's Harley? Where's Harley Kilgore? Democrat out of West Virginia. And they're looking for Harley. They're looking for Harley. Somebody says, shh. They're running all over the building trying to find him. Somebody says, has anybody tried the bar across the street? So they send the Senate pages out trying to find Harley. There he is at the bar across the street in the middle of this landmark historic vote. And he is lit. I mean, he's there, they talk about 3 sheets to the wind. He's about 9 sheets to the wind. I mean, Harley is lit. So one aide gets under this arm, one aide gets under that arm. They kind of drag him back across the street. They open up the Senate doors as they're doing the final count. They look up and they say, oh, we see our esteemed senator from West Virginia. How do you vote? And you hear from the background, nay. Now, nobody knows if that was really Harley because we think he was passed out. So it could have been one of the aides. But the Bricker Amendment went down by 1 drunken vote. But in that debate, it made it very clear that human rights, the right to education, the right to housing, the right to health care, were seen as communistic, foreign to American soil. When the Bricker Amendment is defeated in 1954, the themes that course through it are still there. So when the official civil rights movement begins in 1954, with the Brown decision, and then in 55 with Montgomery. You already have a very narrowed frame in order to fight for black equality. You have the narrowed frame of civil rights and not human rights.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.